My name is Rachel Bennett, and at 32, I was a senior software engineer at TechVision. I'd spent 5 dedicated years there, never imagining a single Zoom call would shatter everything I believed about my workplace. That call ultimately led to the downfall of a once promising tech company. A whispered comment with a live mic changed not just my life, but TechVision's entire future. Before I share my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe to follow more workplace stories that might just save your career someday. When I first joined TechVision, fresh out of MIT with my computer science degree, the company felt like the perfect launchpad. Our sprawling open concept office in downtown Seattle buzzed with creative energy. Whiteboard walls covered in colorful diagrams, free snacks overflowing from kitchen counters, and the infectious excitement of building something revolutionary made every day feel meaningful. TechVision specialized in AI-driven enterprise software solutions. Our flagship product automated complex data analysis for major corporations, saving them millions. When I was recruited, the company had just secured its Series B funding round of $50 million and was the darling of the tech industry. Bradley Thompson, our CEO, appeared on magazine covers as the visionary reshaping corporate AI. His presentation skills were unmatched tall, with a confident stride and the ability to explain complex technology in compelling, simple terms. That made investors eager to open their checkbooks. During my first 2 years, the culture was genuinely collaborative. Teams celebrated each other's wins. Code reviews were constructive learning experiences, not brutal takedowns, and leadership seemed to value work-life balance. Bradley would walk through the office on Fridays, stopping to chat with engineers about their projects and personal lives. He remembered details, asking about your dog by name or following up on vacation plans you'd mentioned months earlier. It was during this golden period that I became close with the colleagues who would later stand beside me through the company's darkest moments. Emma Mitchell, 27, joined a year after me. With her bright blue hair and brilliant mind for solving impossible coding problems, she quickly became indispensable. Where I excelled at system architecture, Emma could look at a complex algorithm and intuitively spot inefficiencies nobody else could see. We began having lunch together regularly, bonding over our shared love of vintage arcade games and frustration with being the only women in most technical meetings. Jason Rodriguez, 34, was already at TechVision when I arrived. Quiet and methodical. He was our systems architecture guru. While others might be louder in meetings, everyone knew that when Jason spoke, his words carried weight. He had an uncanny ability to predict how systems would perform at scale before they were even built. His meticulous documentation saved us countless times when unexpected issues arose. Despite his reserved nature, Jason had a dry wit that would surface at just the right moment to break tension during stressful deployments. Mark Stevens rounded out our core team. At 29, the UI/UX specialist brought vibrant energy to every project. Where the rest of us thought in terms of functionality and efficiency, Mark ensured our products were actually usable by humans. Relentless advocacy for the end-user experience elevated our products above competitors, who created technically sound but confusing interfaces. With an infectious laugh and an endless supply of dad jokes, Mark kept team morale high during crunch times. The shift in company culture began subtly around my 3rd year. TechVision had grown from 50 employees to over 200, and with growth came changes in leadership dynamics. 2 key executives joined who would ultimately play central roles in the company's downfall. Victoria Winters became our coup after a successful stint at a rival tech firm. Where Bradley was charismatic and vision-focused, Victoria was calculating and fixated on metrics. Her sleek, perfectly tailored suits and perpetual expression of mild disapproval became fixtures in our office. In meetings, She would tap her manicured nails against her tablet while interrupting presentations with questions designed to expose weaknesses rather than strengthen ideas. Within months, weekly team check-ins transformed from collaborative strategy sessions into interrogations where developers defended every hour logged on projects. Sarah Parker joined as HR director around the same time. Initially, many of us were hopeful that having dedicated HR leadership would address growing pains in the expanding company. Instead, Sarah functioned more as Victoria's administrative extension than an employee advocate. When concerns were raised about increasing workloads or communication issues, Sarah's standard response became, "That's just the reality of a high-growth startup environment," effectively dismissing legitimate workplace issues. The first major red flag appeared during the annual performance reviews in my 4th year. Despite my team delivering a major feature set 2 weeks ahead of schedule and achievement that secured a contract worth $2 million annually, my bonus was 40% lower than promised. When I questioned this, Victoria explained that while my technical performance was excellent, I needed to demonstrate more cultural alignment with the company's evolving values. The implied message was clear: technical excellence was now secondary to political alignment. Similar situations occurred across departments. Employees who openly questioned decisions or suggested alternative approaches found themselves excluded from key meetings or assigned to less visible projects. The message spread quickly. Conformity was valued over innovation, despite our external marketing claiming the opposite. By my 5th year, the tech vision that had once felt like a second family had transformed dramatically. The free-flowing communication channels had been replaced with rigid reporting structures. Bradley, once accessible to anyone in the company, now operated behind layers of executive assistants and middle managers. His company-wide emails shifted from transparent updates about challenges and victories to carefully crafted corporate speak that said little of substance. Our core engineering team remained tight-knit despite these changes. We created a protective bubble around ourselves, focusing on delivering excellence even as the environment deteriorated. We still believed in the technology we were building, even if we had growing concerns about the people leading the company. The final months before the infamous Zoom incident featured increasing pressure from all directions. Our main competitor had released a similar product with several innovative features, causing TechVision to lose a key prospect. Investor questions about missed growth projections created ripples of anxiety throughout management. Cost-cutting measures appeared. First, small conveniences disappeared. Then hiring freezes were implemented, followed by whispers of potential layoffs. Through it all, our engineering team continued to deliver. We were working on Tech Core 3.0, a complete overhaul of our platform that would leapfrog the competition and potentially open entirely new market segments. The project required extraordinary effort. 80-hour weeks became normal, weekend work expected. Emma, Jason, Mark, and I practically lived at the office, fueled by determination and increasing amounts of caffeine. What we didn't know then was that while we were pouring our souls into saving the company's flagship product, leadership was already making plans that would render our dedication meaningless. The stage was set for a confrontation that would ultimately expose the true nature of what TechVision had become. May 15th began like many others in recent months, early and exhausting. I arrived at the office at 6:30 a.m. Travel mug of strong coffee in hand, badge swiping into the still quiet building. The security guard nodded in recognition. He was used to seeing me at this hour. The calm before the day officially began was precious time for uninterrupted coding. This particular morning carried extra significance. After months of relentless work, our team was just 3 days away from completing the final testing phase. For Tech Core 3.0, the product launch, scheduled for the following week, represented not just a technological leap forward, but potentially the financial lifeline the company desperately needed. I settled at my desk, surrounded by multiple monitors displaying complex code structures. My eyes burned slightly from lack of sleep, but the familiar rhythm of typing soon put me in a state of flow. Around 7:45, Emma arrived, her usual vibrant energy noticeably dimmed by fatigue. "Morning, Ratch," she said, placing a paper bag on my desk. "Brought you a real breakfast. Pretty sure humans can't survive on coffee and protein bars alone." Inside was a still warm egg sandwich. This had become our ritual, taking turns ensuring the other remembered to eat actual food during crunch periods. "You're a lifesaver," I said, realizing I was actually starving. "How's the authentication module looking?" Emma sighed, dropping into her chair. "Fixed the encryption vulnerability at 2 a.m. should be solid now. But I'll need your eyes on it before we merge." By 9 o'clock, Jason and Mark had arrived, and our section of the office hummed with the focused energy of final stage development. The atmosphere among us was one of determined camaraderie, exhausted but united by the finish line in sight. At 10:30, my phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Mandatory company-wide update, Zoom, 11 a.m. I frowned, showing my screen to Emma. Another all hands. Now she groaned. "We don't have time for Bradley's motivational speeches today." Jason looked up from his station. "Wasn't on the schedule yesterday. Must be important." Mark shrugged. Maybe they finally secured that Series D funding. We speculated briefly, before returning to work, squeezing in another productive half hour before the meeting. At 10:55, I reluctantly saved my code and opened the Zoom link. One by one, squares populated the screen as nearly 200 employees joined from various locations. The chat sidebar filled with the usual pleasantries, though I noticed an undercurrent of anxiety in the messages. Everyone was wondering about this unexpected gathering. At exactly 11 o'clock, Bradley's video connected, revealing him seated in his minimalist executive office. His usual confident smile seemed slightly strained. Victoria appeared in a separate window beside him, her expression unreadable as always. "Good morning, Tech Vision team." Bradley began with practiced enthusiasm. "Thank you all for joining on short notice. I wanted to gather everyone for an important update on our strategic direction." What followed was 20 minutes of what our team had privately come to call Bradley's special blend. Corporate jargon mixed with technology buzzwords and vague optimism, signifying very little. He touched on market challenges, competitive pressures, and the need for operational agility in uncertain conditions. Notably absent was any concrete mention of TechCore 3.0, the project our team had sacrificed nights, weekends, and personal relationships to complete. As Bradley spoke about pivoting toward emerging opportunities, I exchanged confused glances with Emma through our video feeds. In our private Slack channel, Jason typed, "Is he seriously not mentioning our work at all?" The presentation shifted to Victoria, who began discussing organizational optimization and resource alignment. Corporate euphemisms that immediately set off alarm bells. "As we refine our strategic focus," she said with clinical detachment, "we'll be evaluating all departments for maximum efficiency and contribution to core business objectives." My stomach tightened. This sounded ominously like preparing the ground for layoffs. I glanced at my team members' video feeds. Emma was frowning, Jason's expression had darkened, and Mark was rapidly typing something in our private chat. After Victoria finished, Bradley returned to center stage for closing remarks. As he spoke about exciting times ahead, I noticed him slightly turn toward Victoria, apparently thinking he had muted himself. The fatal mistake became clear moments later. "Fire her after this call," he whispered to Victoria, his voice perfectly audible to all 200 participants. "We need to make an example before the restructuring announcement." The Zoom gallery froze in collective shock. Bradley continued speaking for several seconds before Victoria's eyes widened in alarm. She made a slashing motion across her throat, but it was too late. He realized his mistake mid-sentence, his face draining of color as he abruptly muted himself. After a painfully long 5 seconds of silence, he reappeared, composure partially restored. Apologies for the technical issue there. As I was saying, we value each of your contributions during this transitional period. That's all for today's update. Thank you, everyone. The meeting ended abruptly, leaving the digital equivalent of stunned silence in its wake. Immediately, my phone exploded with notifications. Emma was calling me on Teams, Jason was messaging in Slack. And Mark had sent a text reading simply, "Holy emergency huddle now." Within 2 minutes, the four of us were in a private video call, faces reflecting identical expressions of shock and betrayal. "He was talking about you, Rachel," Emma said, her voice shaking with anger. "It had to be you. You're leading the core project." Jason, normally so measured, looked genuinely angry. "After everything we've done? 5 months of around-the-clock work, and they're planning to fire you as an example before we even launch." My mind raced, piecing together recent interactions, the way Bradley had avoided my questions at last week's status meeting, how Victoria had begun excluding me from certain planning emails, the sudden interest from HR in documenting the handover, procedures for my projects. "They're planning a larger restructuring," I said, the realization washing over me. "They're going to gut the engineering team after we deliver the product next week." Mark ran his hands through his hair. "Use us up and throw us away." Classic corporate playbook. A heavy silence fell as we each processed what had happened. 5 years of my professional life, countless sacrifices, unwavering loyalty, all to be discarded with a callous whisper on a hot mic. "So what do we do now?" Emma finally asked the question hanging in the digital space between us. When Emma's question landed, it felt like the pivotal moment it would prove to be. The four of us stared at each other through our screens, the weight of potential decisions hanging heavy in the virtual space between us. "I need a minute," I said, pushing back from my desk. My apartment suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in as the reality of the situation crystallized. A tease. My living room, thoughts racing between disbelief, hurt, and a rapidly building anger. 5 years. 5 years of canceled vacations and missed family gatherings. The relationship that had ended because Tech Vision is clearly your priority, not us. Countless nights working until 3 a.m. only to be back online for 8 a.m. meetings, all while believing I was building something meaningful, that my contributions were valued. When I returned to my computer, my team was still waiting, their faces reflecting my own emotional turmoil. "They don't deserve another minute of our time," I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. "But before we react, let's be clear about what actually happened." Jason, ever the analytical one, had already pulled up the meeting recording that automatically saved to our shared drive. We watched the critical moment again, this time paying careful attention to the exact words and context. "Fire her after this call. We need to make an example before the restructuring announcement." There was no ambiguity, no possible misinterpretation. "Rachel, there's no question he meant you," Emma said, her usual vibrant energy channeled into controlled fury. "You're the only senior female engineer leading a critical project right now." Mark nodded. "And the make an example part confirms this isn't just about your position. They want to create fear before they start broader cuts." "Let's think about this rationally," Jason suggested, though his typically calm demeanor was clearly strained. "What exactly do we bring to the company, and what would happen if we left?" This launched us into a detailed inventory of our contributions and institutional knowledge. I was the chief architect of TechCore's back-end system, the only person who fully understood how all components integrated. Emma had single-handedly developed the machine learning algorithms that gave our product its competitive edge. Jason maintained the infrastructure that kept everything running. With security protocols he had customized so extensively that no documentation fully captured his knowledge. And Mark had designed the intuitive interface that clients consistently praised as the reason they chose us over competitors. They literally cannot launch without us, Emma realized, not in any reasonable time frame. And the launch is in 3 days, Mark added, with the Morgan Stanley demo scheduled for day 1. Jason pulled up a spreadsheet he maintained. Morgan Stanley's contract alone is worth $7.3 million annually. Add the other 6 enterprise clients waiting on this release, nearly $30 million in annual recurring revenue. I finished, the number hanging in the air between us. We fell silent again, the magnitude of our leverage becoming clear. Remember last year when Bradley presented at the All Hands about being a family? Emma said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Right before he cut the parental leave policy to remain competitive. This opened the floodgates of our collective memory. We recalled how the company had gradually stripped away benefits while demanding increasing sacrifice. How promotions increasingly went to those who were politically savvy rather than technically skilled. How transparency had been replaced with corporate doublespeak. My cousin works at Redshift Systems, Jason mentioned, said they'd been trying to build something like TechCore for a year without success. Their CTO would probably hire our entire team on the spot. Neuron AI reached out to me last month, Emma admitted. I didn't even respond because I was so committed to finishing our launch. As we talked, I opened a blank document and began typing. What had started as processing my thoughts was evolving into something more concrete. A resignation letter. Are we really doing this? Mark asked, watching my screen through our shared window. I think we have to, I replied, continuing to type. Not just for ourselves, but because no one should be treated this way. If we stay after this, we're telling them this behavior is acceptable. Emma nodded firmly. I'm in. 100%. Same, Jason said. Enough is enough. Mark took a deep breath. Let's do it right then. Make it crystal clear why we're leaving. For the next 30 minutes, we crafted a detailed email. It was professional but unflinching in stating the facts. We had heard the CEO's comment, we understood its implications, and we were collectively resigning effective immediately. We listed our key responsibilities and noted that while we would normally provide transition documentation, the company's approach had made that courtesy impossible. As a final touch, we attached limited handover notes enough to prove we weren't being vindictive, but insufficient for anyone to quickly assume our roles. We addressed it to Bradley, Victoria, and Sarah, with the board of directors CC'd to ensure the incident couldn't be buried. Should we include the recording? Emma asked. After discussion, we decided against it for now. The existence of the recording would be our insurance policy if the company tried to dispute our account or threaten legal action. With the email complete, we each read it silently, the magnitude of what we were about to do sinking in. 5 years, I said quietly, thinking of the journey from excited new hire to this moment of profound disillusionment. 2 promotions and a patent, Emma added. My entire professional career, Jason noted. The best team I've ever worked with, Mark finished. We agreed to count down from 3, then hit send simultaneously, final act of solidarity. 3, 2, 1, 4 clicks, and it was done. The email moved from draft to sent, its digital journey to the executive suite irreversible. For a moment, we all sat in stunned silence, processing the enormity of what we had just done. My phone buzzed almost immediately, a text from another engineer asking what was happening. Word was already spreading. No regrets, Emma said firmly. Breaking the silence, we deserve better than this. We all do. I agree, I said, feeling a strange mixture of anxiety and liberation. Now we figure out what comes next. Little did we know, in that moment, just how significant our decision would prove to be, not just for us, but for the entire company we were leaving behind. The first response came within 15 minutes of our mass resignation. A furious email from Bradley to all four of us. This is completely unprofessional and potentially a breach of your contracts. I expect all of you in my office immediately to discuss this grave misunderstanding. Your access credentials remain active. Does not? Accepted. Victoria's message arrived 5 minutes later, her tone markedly different. I understand today's meeting caused concern. What you heard was taken completely out of context and referred to an upcoming reorganization that would have actually expanded your team's responsibilities. Please call me directly so we can clarify this unfortunate miscommunication. The transparent attempt to rewrite what we'd clearly heard might have been amusing if it weren't so insulting. None of us responded. By early afternoon, Sarah from HR had sent formal emails warning about abandonment of duties and potential legal consequences, followed by calendar invites for urgent resolution meetings. These two went unanswered. Instead, we gathered. At my apartment, laptops open on my dining table. Processing what we'd done while monitoring the unfolding chaos through messages from colleagues still at the company. Kelsey from marketing says Bradley's been locked in the conference room with Victoria and the legal team for the past 2 hours, Emma reported, scrolling through her phone. Apparently, he threw his laptop at one point. Jason was reviewing our employment contracts. They might try to enforce the non-competes, but given the circumstances, I doubt they'd hold up. Still, we should consult an attorney. Mark had been unusually quiet, staring at his screen. Guys, he said finally, have you checked your LinkedIn? My inbox is exploding. He turned his laptop around, showing dozens of messages from recruiters, former colleagues, and even competitors who had somehow already heard about our departure. The tech community is smaller than we think, I said, opening my own LinkedIn to find a similar flood of messages. Word travels fast. My phone rang a TechVision number I didn't recognize. After letting it go to voicemail, a text followed from Brian, a mid-level manager I'd worked with occasionally. Rachel, it's absolute chaos here. Nobody knows how to access the core repository branches you were working on. Morgan Stanley demo prep meeting was just postponed. What the hell happened? I showed the message to the others. And so it begins. By evening, the company's desperation was becoming clear. Bradley himself called each of us multiple times. When that failed, he sent emails with increasingly generous offers for me. Promotion to Chief Technology Officer, a 50% salary increase, and significant equity. For the others, senior director positions, 35% raises, and expanded teams. Panicking, Emma observed, forwarding the latest email. They know they can't meet the launch deadline without us. It's too little, too late, Mark said firmly. If they valued us this much, why were they planning to fire Rachel this morning? The next day brought more revelations as our former colleagues kept us updated. The Morgan Stanley preparation meeting had been a disaster. No one could properly explain how the core systems worked or answer detailed technical questions. The marketing team was frantically trying to create materials without actual product demonstrations. A war room had been established to try reconstructing our knowledge from comments in the code repositories. They're going to have to delay the launch, Jason predicted. There's no way around it. He was proven right just hours later when a former teammate forwarded an internal email announcing a strategic postponement of the Tech Core 3.0 release to incorporate additional enterprise-grade features. That afternoon, we received another surprise, a news alert from a tech industry blog breaking key engineering leadership exits TechVision days before a major product launch. The article included minimal details but mentioned sources familiar with the matter describing a significant disagreement over technical direction. The company's stock had dropped 7% on the news. They're trying to control the narrative, I said, reading the artfully vague company statement included in the article. Make it sound like a normal strategic disagreement rather than their CEO getting caught planning to fire people right after they delivered. As the evening progressed, more colleagues reached out, some curious, others supportive, a few angry about being left in a difficult position. I felt guilty about the impact on teammates who had done nothing wrong, but reminded myself that the situation was entirely of leadership's making. The next morning, day 3 of what we'd come to call the aftermath, the crisis deepened. Stock had dropped another 9% overnight as more details leaked. 2 senior product managers had resigned. Customer support was being flooded with calls from concerned clients who had read the news. Emma forwarded an email from her friend in sales. Enterprise clients freaking out about launch delay. Morgan Stanley hinting they might explore alternatives. If timeline extends beyond 30 days, VP of Sales had to be talked out of resigning during emergency meeting. We gathered again at my apartment, this time with a new purpose. Several top-tier tech companies had reached out about hiring us as a team. We needed to decide our next steps. Redshif's offer is the most compelling, Jason said, reviewing the details. They want us to essentially rebuild what we did at TechVision, but with proper support and resources. Neuron AI is offering more money, though, Emma countered, and their tech stack is more advanced. As we debated our options, my phone lit up with a notification. Another news alert. TechVision shareholders demand emergency board meeting following engineering exodus and product delay. Attached was a statement from an activist investor group calling for immediate leadership changes and a full investigation into the circumstances surrounding the departure of key technical personnel. Mark looked up from his laptop. "Kay, did you see who just viewed your LinkedIn profile?" Thomas Chen, tech reporter at The Information. Think they're working on a bigger story? The thought made my stomach tighten. While I felt our actions were justified, I had never sought to be at the center of industry drama. I had simply wanted to do meaningful work with people I respected. Later that afternoon, we received identical emails from Patricia Alvarez, TechVision's lead board member, requesting a confidential conversation to better understand recent events. After discussion, we agreed to speak with her, not to help salvage the company, but to ensure the board heard the unvarnished truth. That evening, the 4 of us joined a video call with Patricia and 2 other board members. Their expressions were grave as we recounted the events, including playing the damning recording from the all-hands meeting. "This is deeply concerning," Patricia said after a long pause. "I want to personally apologize for this experience. The board was not aware of the specific circumstances of your departures until now." After the call, we felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. The company we had helped build was imploding. And while the responsibility lay with its leadership, watching it happen brought no joy. "It's like seeing a house you helped build burn down," I said quietly as we closed our laptops. "Even if you weren't the one who set the fire." None of us could have predicted just how much worse things would get in the days to come. 1 week after our resignation, TechVision's carefully constructed public relations strategy collapsed entirely. The company had been attempting to frame our departure as an ordinary transition, with Bradley giving an interview to a friendly tech publication claiming we had been planning to leave for months and that succession plans were well established. That narrative imploded when Thomas Chen's investigation in The Information was published. Titled "Toxic Leadership and Technical Exodus: Inside TechVision's Meltdown." The article featured anonymous interviews with current and former employees, who corroborated our account of the hot mic incident and detailed a pattern of troubling leadership behavior. "Did you see this quote?" Emma asked, reading from her phone during our morning coffee at the local cafe that had become our informal meeting spot. According to 7 current employees, CEO Bradley Thompson routinely described female engineers as too emotional for leadership roles in private executive meetings. "No wonder they were planning to fire you, Rachel." I felt a complex mix of emotions, validation that the problems went beyond our individual experiences, but also disappointment in an industry that still harbored such attitudes. The article included other damning revelations. Victoria had allegedly terminated a pregnant product manager just weeks before her maternity leave would have begun. HR had systematically buried complaints about overwork and burnout. The company had knowingly misrepresented progress to investors during the last funding round. Most crucially, Thomas had obtained a partial audio recording of the Zoom incident. Not from us, but from another employee who had been so disturbed they preserved evidence. While the article didn't include the actual audio, its existence was confirmed, making the company's denials impossible to maintain. TechVision stock plummeted 18% the day the article published. By mid-afternoon, my phone was ringing constantly. Journalists, recruiters, former colleagues, even competitors seeking insider information. Everyone wanted to speak with the team at the center of tech's latest scandal. We agreed to maintain our silence for now, focusing instead on our next career steps. The four of us had narrowed our options to two companies, Redshift Systems and Neuron AI. Both offered compelling packages to hire us as a unit, with the freedom to build new products using our expertise. After extensive discussions and multiple interviews, we were leaning toward Redshift, whose culture seemed most aligned with our values. As we deliberated over lunch, Jason received an urgent text from his former teammate Michael. Emergency all hands just announced for 3 p.m. Rumors flying about major leadership changes. Sure enough, at 4:30, the tech news sites exploded with breaking updates. Breaking TechVision board places CEO Bradley Thompson on immediate leave of absence, pending investigation. The accompanying statement from the board cited recently raised concerns about company culture and leadership decisions and announced that Patricia Alvarez would serve as interim CEO while an independent investigation was conducted. They're throwing him under the bus to save the company, Mark observed. Classic damage control. Emma shook her head. It's too little, too late. The problems run deeper than just Bradley. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn message from Patricia herself. Rachel, I hope this message finds you well. Today's announcement is just the first step in addressing the serious issues you and your team brought to our attention. I would value the opportunity to speak with you about how we might rebuild trust and potentially welcome you back to help lead TechVision in a new direction. The door remains open. I showed the message to my team. Their reactions were immediate and unanimous. Absolutely not, Emma said firmly. They created this mess, Jason added. Let them deal with the consequences. Mark nodded in agreement. We've already moved on. They should too. I appreciated their solidarity but found myself conflicted. Many good people still worked at TechVision, people who had done nothing wrong but were now facing uncertain futures as the company spiraled downward. That evening, we received an unexpected message from a producer at a major business news network, requesting an interview about the growing crisis at TechVision and its implications for tech industry culture. After discussion, we decided that speaking publicly might help others facing similar situations in the industry. The interview, conducted remotely the following morning, was more intense than we anticipated. The host pressed us on whether our mass resignation was an overreaction, whether we had considered the impact on other employees, and if we felt responsible for the company's current predicament. We didn't create this situation, I responded calmly. We simply refused to be treated with disrespect after years of dedication. Every employee deserves basic dignity and honesty from their leadership, Emma added. This isn't about one incident or one company. It's about changing a tech culture that treats engineers as disposable resources rather than human beings. The interview went viral almost immediately, sparking intense debate across social media and tech forums. Some praised our courage, while others criticized us for supposedly overreacting to typical corporate politics. By afternoon, the hashtag TechVision Exodus was trending, with current and former employees from various companies sharing their own stories of toxic workplace experiences. What had begun as our personal stand was evolving into a larger conversation about tech industry culture. Meanwhile, TechVision's crisis deepened. 2 additional senior executives resigned. An anonymous employee leaked internal emails showing Victoria and Bradley discussing how to manage out employees who raised concerns about work-life balance, confirming the systemic nature of the problems. The real bombshell dropped 2 days later when Morgan Stanley publicly announced they were reevaluating their vendor relationship with TechVision in light of recent developments. As the company's largest potential client, this statement sent shockwaves through the industry. TechVision stock, already weakened, plunged another 22%. That evening, we received a surprising email. The tech journalist Thomas Chen wanted to meet for an off-the-record conversation about significant developments at TechVision. Curious but cautious, we agreed to a video call the next morning. "I thought you should know," Thomas began after pleasantries, "that my sources tell me TechVision is considering legal action against the 4 of you. They're building a case claiming you sabotaged the company by coordinating your departures and withholding critical knowledge transfer." The news hit like a physical blow. "Despite everything, I hadn't expected them to go this far. That's ridiculous," Emma sputtered. "They were literally planning to fire Rachel. Which is why I wanted to warn you," Thomas continued. "They're desperate and looking for scapegoats. The board is facing pressure from major investors, and litigation against you would give them someone to blame besides themselves." After thanking Thomas for the warning, we immediately contacted an attorney specializing in employment law. Assessment was reassuring, given the circumstances of our departure and the evidence we possessed. Any legal action would likely backfire spectacularly on TechVision. Still, we needed to prepare. That preparation became unnecessary the very next day when another bombshell hit. A group of TechVision employees had formed a union and filed formal complaints with the National Labor Relations Board, citing retaliatory practices and a hostile work environment. The company, now fighting battles on multiple fronts, quietly dropped any plans to pursue action against us. Instead, they announced another emergency board meeting to chart a path forward during this challenging transitional period. By the end of the second week following our resignation, TechVision had lost 40% of its market value, postponed all major product launches indefinitely, and seen an exodus of talent across departments. What had begun with a careless whisper on a hot mic had escalated into one of the most dramatic corporate implosions in recent tech history. As I watched these developments unfold from afar, I felt strangely detached, as if observing the aftermath of a natural disaster I had narrowly escaped. My team and I had made our decision, stood by our principles, and were now focusing on our future. We had officially accepted Redshift Systems' offer and would be starting the following month, rebuilding our professional lives on more solid ground. Little did we know that TechVision's worst days were still ahead, and that our decision would ultimately be viewed as the first domino in a collapse that would reshape conversations about workplace culture throughout the industry. 1 month after our departure, what had begun as a crisis at TechVision had evolved into an existential threat. The company's stock had stabilized, but only after losing nearly half its value. The damage to its reputation and operations proved far more lasting than anyone had anticipated. My team and I had moved on, officially starting our new positions at Redshift Systems. The company had created a special division for us, with autonomy to build a next-generation analytics platform that would compete directly with TechCore. The contrast between our new work environment and TechVision was stark. Transparent communication, reasonable expectations, and leadership that actually listened. Yet, we couldn't entirely escape the shadow of what we'd left behind. The tech industry is remarkably small, and news continued to reach us through former colleagues who had become friends. "Did you see the latest?" Emma asked one morning, dropping into the chair beside my desk at Redshift's bright, airy office. She turned her tablet toward me, displaying a tech news headline: TechVision announces 30% workforce reduction amid restructuring efforts. The accompanying article detailed how the company had conducted massive layoffs across all departments, citing strategic realignment and focus on core competencies. Most telling was the timing. Exactly one day after TechVision had failed. To secure an emergency bridge funding round that would have sustained operations through their product development delays. "They're in free fall," I said, scanning the details. "This isn't strategic. It's desperation." "Look at the departments hit hardest," Emma pointed out. "Engineering lost 45% of its staff. They're gutting the very teams needed to fix their product issues." Jason joined us, having seen the same news. "My old roommate still works there. Says they're operating in skeleton mode now. Multiple projects completely abandoned." Throughout the day, my phone buzzed with messages from former colleagues affected by the layoffs. Many expressed relief at escaping a toxic environment, but others felt betrayed after years of dedication. I found myself in the unexpected role of career counselor, connecting them with contacts at companies I knew were hiring. By evening, another bombshell dropped. Morgan Stanley had officially terminated their contract with TechVision, citing inability to deliver promised technological capabilities within acceptable timeframes. As their most prominent potential client, this public rejection sent another shockwave through the industry. The following day, 2 more enterprise clients announced they were switching to competitors, representing another $12 million in lost annual revenue. The dominoes were falling faster than anyone could have predicted. A week later, Victoria Winters resigned as coup, releasing a carefully worded statement about pursuing new opportunities that conspicuously avoided mentioning the company's troubles. Industry insiders noted she had scrubbed nearly all mentions of TechVision from her LinkedIn profile, a digital attempt to distance herself from the sinking ship. Bradley Thompson, still technically on leave rather than formally terminated, gave a disastrous interview to a tech podcast where he blamed disloyal employees and coordinated sabotage for the company's struggles. The backlash was immediate, with former employees publicly contradicting his claims with specific examples of his leadership failures. The board finally acted decisively, formally terminating Bradley and announcing a comprehensive search for new executive leadership. Patricia Alvarez continued as interim CEO, but industry analysts openly questioned whether anyone could salvage what remained of the once promising company. Throughout this period, my team and I remained publicly silent, focusing on our new work, while privately processing the ongoing collapse of our former workplace. We had made peace with our decision, but watching the broader fallout, especially for colleagues who had done nothing wrong, was difficult. 2 months after our departure, TechVision announced another round of layoffs, reducing staff to less than 40% of its previous size. The company withdrew from its expensive downtown headquarters, consolidating remaining operations in a small satellite office. Industry publications began running speculative pieces about potential bankruptcy or acquisition scenarios. It was around this time that we received unexpected emails from Patricia Alvarez, requesting a confidential meeting with our team. After discussion, we agreed, curious about her perspective on the situation. The video call revealed a visibly exhausted Patricia, the strain of trying to salvage TechVision evident in her face. "I won't take much of your time," she began. "I simply wanted to acknowledge directly and officially that your departure was entirely justified given the circumstances. The board has reviewed all evidence, including the recorded comments, and we recognize that the failure was entirely on the side of leadership, not yours." The admission was surprising in its candor. "We're attempting to rebuild with a fundamentally different approach to company culture," she continued. "I know you've moved on, as you should have, but I felt you deserved to hear this acknowledgement." Directly after the call, Mark summed up what we were all feeling. Too little, too late, but still. Validation feels good. 3 months after our resignation, the final chapter of TechVision's collapse began. Trading of the company's stock was temporarily suspended following rumors of an imminent bankruptcy filing. When trading resumed, shares had fallen to just $1.23, down from $68.40 before our departure. The formal bankruptcy announcement came the following week. TechVision would enter Chapter 11 reorganization, with plans to sell its intellectual property and remaining assets to pay creditors. A company once valued at over $800 million was now essentially worthless. As news of the bankruptcy spread, I received a message from Daniel Harris, one of the junior engineers who had worked on my team. He had found a position at a promising startup but was struggling with feelings of failure regarding TechVision. Was there something more we could have done? He asked during our call. Should we have seen the problem sooner? I found myself reflecting deeply before answering. The responsibility for a company's culture and decisions rests with its leadership, I told him. As employees, we can raise concerns and set boundaries. But we can't fix fundamental problems if those in charge refuse to acknowledge them. That conversation sparked something important for me, a realization that our experience, painful as it was, contained valuable lessons for the broader tech community. When Emma suggested we consider speaking at an upcoming industry conference about ethical leadership in tech, I surprised myself by agreeing immediately. For months after leaving TechVision, we found ourselves on stage at a Tech Ethics Summit, sharing our story with hundreds of industry professionals. The session, initially scheduled for a medium-sized room, had to be moved to the main hall due to overwhelming interest. The most important lesson we learned, I explained during our presentation, is that technical excellence cannot compensate for cultural failure. A toxic environment will eventually destroy even the most innovative company. And as employees, Emma added, recognizing your worth and having the courage to walk away from situations that devalue you isn't just self-preservation, can be the catalyst for necessary change. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of attendees approached us afterward, sharing similar experiences and asking advice about their own workplace challenges. What had begun as our personal stand for dignity had evolved into something larger. A conversation about values, ethics, and humanity in an industry often fixated solely on growth and innovation. As we left the conference, Jason pointed out a final piece of industry news on his phone. TechVision's assets had been sold at auction for pennies on the dollar, with different competitors picking apart the technology the company had once proudly developed. The corporate entity that had dominated our professional lives for years had effectively ceased to exist. It's really over, Mark said quietly. No, Emma countered, linking her arm through mine as we walked. Something better is just beginning. She was right. Through all the chaos and pain, we had found our voices, our boundaries, and ultimately a way forward that aligned with our values. The company had collapsed, but we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined to create the kind of work environment everyone deserves. 6 months after the fateful Zoom call that changed everything, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of Redshift Systems headquarters, watching the Seattle skyline shimmer in the morning light. My reflection showed a different woman than the one who had loyally served TechVision for 5 years, more confident, more at peace, somehow both softer and stronger simultaneously. Our team had not just survived the transition, we were thriving. The project we'd been hired to develop, now called Prism Analytics, was progressing ahead of schedule. Our experience had made us not just better engineers, but better collaborators, more attentive to both the technical and human elements of building technology. When we negotiated our contracts with Redshift, we had insisted on an unusual clause: explicit ethical leadership commitments in writing. The provision detailed expectations for communication transparency, respectful treatment of employees, and proper channels for addressing concerns. Initially, raised eyebrows had given way to respect, with Redshift's CEO eventually implementing similar provisions company-wide. Morning, Chief Architect, Emma called, dropping into the desk beside mine with her trademark energy, blue hair now streaked with purple. Ready for the investor demo? I nodded, closing my reflective moment. By the window. Everything's prepared. Jason and Mark are already in the conference room setting up. As we walk through the office, I noticed the healthy buzz of productive work engineers collaborating without the undercurrent of anxiety that had permeated TechVision. People looked up and smiled as we passed, a simple human acknowledgement that I now realized had been increasingly rare in our previous workplace. The investor presentation went flawlessly. Jason's infrastructure overview impressed even the most technical investors, while Mark's demonstration of the user interface drew appreciative nods. When the lead investor, a sharp venture capitalist who had backed multiple unicorn companies, asked about our timeline to market, I could answer honestly, rather than with the artificially optimistic projections Bradley had always demanded. We're looking at beta release in 4 months, with full launch 2 months after that, I explained. We could push faster, but we're prioritizing stability and security testing. Refreshing to hear realistic timelines, she responded with a knowing smile. Too many companies overpromise and underdeliver. After the investors left, our new CEO, Michael Chin, pulled me aside. Unlike Bradley's performative charisma, Michael's leadership style was quietly effective, focused on enabling rather than controlling his teams. That went even better than expected, he said. The feedback was excellent. But more importantly, how are you all settling in? It's been 6 months now. Anything you need? The genuine concern still caught me off guard sometimes. We're good. Really good, actually. I'm glad, he replied. What happened at TechVision was ultimately their loss and our gain, but I know transitions like that leave marks. My door is always open. That evening, our team gathered at my apartment for dinner. It's a monthly tradition we'd established to maintain our connection outside office walls. As I prepared pasta in the kitchen, I could hear Emma and Mark debating the merits of different framework approaches, while Jason offered occasional dry commentary that made them both laugh. These gatherings had become a space for processing our shared experience. Though the raw hurt had gradually given way to reflection and occasional gallows humor. Tonight, however, Emma brought unexpected news. Did you see who reached out to me on LinkedIn? She asked, showing her phone screen. Sarah from HR at TechVision. Apparently, she's job hunting. The company's down to its last 20 employees and closing completely next month. We all paused, absorbing this information. TechVision's gradual collapse had continued since our departure. But this was the final chapter. Not surprised, Jason said. But still, I know. I nodded. It's like hearing about a house you once lived in being demolished. You've moved on, but it still feels significant. The conversation turned to former colleagues we'd kept in touch with. Most had landed on their feet. In fact, several had followed us to Redshift once positions opened up. Others had scattered across the tech landscape, many finding healthier work environments in the process. I got an interesting email today, Mark mentioned as we moved to the living room with our plates. A producer from that technology podcast wants us to do an episode about toxic tech culture and employee advocacy. Apparently, our conference talk is still making waves. Are we becoming the poster children for standing up to bad management? Jason asked, raising an eyebrow. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, Emma countered. If our experience helps others recognize red flags or find the courage to leave bad situations, isn't that worth sharing? I considered this as I curled up in my favorite armchair. The past 6 months had included extensive therapy to process what I now recognized as workplace trauma. The constant anxiety, imposter syndrome, and blurred work-life boundaries hadn't been normal. They'd been symptoms of a toxic environment I'd gradually accepted as inevitable. I think we should do it, I decided, but focus on the recovery and rebuilding, not just the dramatic exit. That's the part people really need to hear. The others agreed, and conversation shifted to weekend plans and technical challenges on our current project. As the evening wound down, my phone buzzed with an unexpected notification. An email from Bradley Thompson. I almost deleted it unread. But curiosity won out. The message was brief. Rachel, I've had a lot of time to reflect since everything happened. While I still believe some media portrayals were unfair, I recognize my role in creating a culture that ultimately failed both the company and its people, including you and your team. The consequences have been humbling. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging my accountability. I hope you've found a better situation, Bradley. I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. The acknowledgement wasn't exactly an apology, but it represented more self-awareness than I'd ever witnessed from him. After the others left, I sat on my balcony under the stars, reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. From the shock and betrayal of the hot mic incident to the vindication of watching TechVision face consequences. From the anxiety of starting over to the satisfaction of building something new with integrity. It had been a profound transformation. The next morning, I made a decision I'd been contemplating for weeks. After our team's daily stand-up meeting, I approached Michael with a proposal for a new initiative, a mentorship program specifically designed to help early career engineers develop both technical skills and workplace boundaries. To technical training exists everywhere, I explained. But no one teaches you how to recognize unhealthy workplace dynamics or advocate for yourself professionally. I think we have something valuable to offer there. Michael didn't just approve the idea, he expanded it, suggesting we develop it as a company-wide program that could eventually be shared with the broader tech community. That afternoon, I updated my professional bio on our company website, adding a new line that felt both vulnerable and powerful. Advocate for ethical tech workplaces and survivor of corporate toxicity. Now dedicated to building technology with humanity at its center. Emma noticed it immediately, sending me a message. Love the new bio. Honest without being bitter. Perfect. 6 months earlier, I had been defined by my relationship to a toxic company, measuring my worth by its validation. Now, I understood that walking away hadn't been a failure or an overreaction. It had been an act of self-respect that created space for genuine growth. As our team gathered to plan the next development sprint, I looked at these colleagues who had become something more than friends through our shared journey. We had learned that technical excellence requires psychological safety, that loyalty should be reciprocal, and that sometimes the most powerful professional stance is simply walking away from environments that diminish your humanity. Before we dive into the technical stuff, I said, I just want to say I'm grateful to be building something with all of you. Somewhere that values what we bring to the table. Here, Mark responded with a smile. From company meltdown to company building, not a bad recovery story. The best revenge is good engineering, Jason deadpanned, drawing laughs from all of us. Emma raised her coffee mug in a toast. Boundaries, new beginnings, and building technology that makes us proud. We clinked mugs, a simple gesture of solidarity and celebration. The company we had helped build had collapsed, but from its ashes, we had created something more valuable, a model for how technology work could be both innovative and humane, challenging and respectful, ambitious and ethical. The whispered words that had once threatened my career had ultimately freed me to build something better. Sometimes destruction clears the path for more authentic creation. Sometimes walking away is the first step towards something worth walking toward. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to leave a toxic workplace? How did you know it was time to walk away? And what lessons did you learn from the experience? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more workplace stories, and share with someone who might need the reminder that standing up for your worth is never an overreaction. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your value isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to honor yourself.